let's look at the browser architectural overview. This is one of the exercises that I gave you. So the browser is really a silly application. It doesn't have any very smart processing, complex logic into it. The only thing it does is contact DNS, get IP address of server, establish TCP connection with the server, request the page, receive the page, display it on the screen. That's it. If it has to do anything more complex than that, it requires additional logic. For example, if it has to play videos or music or open a Word document, open a PDF document, or anything other than parsing HTML, then it needs a plugin. Or it needs to open another program that's going to display these documents. So there's two ways to do that. Either additional logic in the form of a plugin is loaded inside the browser process. You guys remember what is a process? So the process is an instance of a running program. So one of the programs that's currently running on the machine is called a process. Or the browser has a process space with its own memory space and things like that allocated for it. With the plugin, will get loaded inside the browser's process space. That's different than opening another application which runs in a separate process. That memory is not shared with the browser and has nothing to do with the browser. It runs separately, gets its own CPU and its own memory and everything else. So either we will load additional logic inside the browser process, or if the browser is silly enough and it doesn't have any plugins, it can get help from an external application. So it's going to open, let's say this is an MP3 file, it needs to play the music, it'll open up some media player, for example. Or if it's a Word file and it cannot display it, it's going to open Microsoft Word or Adobe Reader or something. So this is what the client is doing. Let's see what the server is doing. The server is always there. The server doesn't sleep. It's available 24/7 and it's sitting there and it's bound itself into a port, which is the TCP port number 80 for HTTP requests, and it's listening on that port. So remember, the port is a small doorway or a path to get into that particular computer. So the web server binds itself to the HTTP port number 80 and it's listening for incoming requests. As soon as there is a connection request, it accepts the connection from the client. It determines which page it wants, which file name it needs, and where what is the path to that file, checks on its drive on the disk. Then it has to get the file from the disk, which is slow. So anything that has to be obtained from the disk takes additional time. And so for that reason, the web server usually has a bunch of multiple threads running. So, or every request, the web server will create a new thread and assign it a worker thread job to do. Go to the disk and get this file. Because if the server has to do this, it will be very slow and it will not be able to respond to other client requests while it's waiting on disk I/O. So it will have multiple threads, usually one for each client request. Once it gets the file from the disk, it will send the file to the client and release the TCP connection. Now, we could have more complex logic going back to our question earlier. Other than just sending a static page, the page itself that the client is requesting could be some dynamic page. So this could be, for example, a Java server page or a active server page, some kind of other page that is not a static page, but it runs on the server. So whenever the client requested this Java server page, or active server page, or PHP, or whatever it is, this means that the server is not just going to send it back, but it has to run it on the server itself. So there's some code inside the page that's going to run on the server itself and do some processing to generate a particular output specific to that client. So let's say welcome HTML page is just a page that says a picture and says welcome. And we can always send this to everyone that wants it. But if it's your bank account, then the page is going to be different for every person that requests it. Because it has to display its balance and it's whatever the person was spending. So the server has to do some processing before it can send the customized page to the specific client. Now, going back to the multiple threads, so this is what happens. The server has multiple threads. Each thread will run for one client request, and it's assigned designated as a worker thread to go and get this stuff from the disk. Some of the stuff will be placed in a cache, which means some of the requested pages or documents or files will be placed in cache to speed up the processing. So if the page is in the cache, obviously it will be served much faster. If we get to go to disk, that takes a long time. And if we didn't have these threads, if we have a single process, every time it goes to the disk, it will be unable to get new connection requests and send responses until it's finished with the disk. So that's why we have these multiple threads going on. And oftentimes these threads can get in the way of each other and deadlock each other, and that's when the server is dead and becomes like server service unavailable error. Let's look at the static page. So the static page is, for example, welcome HTML. That will be when it's always the same page for every client. So it has some code that doesn't ever change. It just displays a picture that says welcome. If we have, so this is how it looks like. And it's always like that for every client. Now, we could create an HTML form that would accept input from the client. For example, their name, password, or something that they need to request, such as place an order. If we do that, we have to use the post methods, because we will be not just getting something from the server, but we'll be posting this information to the server. So the name, address, what does it want, big widget or small widget or whatever, and submit the order. So in that case, we are sending information to the server. So that will become a dynamic page, because what the server will respond would be different for each client, depending on the information that they filled out. So what has to happen is, on the client, the user will fill out some information, send it to the server. Now on the server itself, we are doing server-side processing. For example, we have to look up this client into a database, which is also running on the same server or on a different server. And then once we look up the information for that client, we will generate a specific page for that client and send it back to them. For example, I placed your order, I looked at my inventory, now I have decremented the size of the number of amount of small widgets that I have, because I just sold one to you, and here is your order confirmation, and send it back. That will be a dynamic page because it's customized for each client. This can be done. So the client side, we could have some scripting language that will run on the client side in order to fill out information into this order form, or to check for errors in the order form. These things will be running on the client, so that's a client-side code, such as JavaScript. And on the server, we will have a server-side code, such as Java server page, or active server page, or Perl page. So they could be client code and server code. The client code obviously runs on the client, and that's just a script that checks for errors on the screen, or it does something without needing the server for any reason. The server, though, would be computing more complex logic and connecting to its database and checking its records or doing something before it can generate a response to the server, implementing some business logic. Now, the HTML is a markup language that specifies formatting. And the way it does that is by using tags. So let's say this text is bold, so it will start with a bold and end with /bold to show the closing tag. Or this text is italic, or this text is particular color, or there's an image here, and this is the size of the image, and so forth, but the tags are standard. So HTML has predefined tags. If we want to define our own tags, we could use an extended markup language to do that. And then we can specify our own tags, such as book, or author, or something else that we want. So here's an overview of the client-side scripting available that runs on the client, and the server-side dynamic pages. So on the client side, we have scripts such as JavaScript, Visual Basic Script, HTML, XML is all languages and the cascading style sheets. you were asking for earlier. These are all languages that run on the client side. So for example, they might create certain styles, or they might create forms, obtain information that clients filled out in the forms, such as their name, their credit card, or something like that, and send it off to the server. The server-side languages are things like Java server pages, active server pages, Perl, and CGI is all technology that allows for process to be created on the server to produce dynamic pages for the client. These languages allow us to implement some business logic that will run on the server, such as connect to a database or do something else, and then generate unique response for each client.
Can we use JavaScript on the server side?
No, JavaScript is just client-side language.
But lately we can use JavaScript on the server side, right? Because there's like Node.js. Have you ever heard about that?
You could if you want to, but that's not typically what it's designed for. So
JavaScript is designed for internet, right?
it's a script. So supposedly it runs usually on the client. So you would use that for something like error check. Like type your phone number and he typed 00000. Sorry, that's not a valid phone number. That you don't need the server for that. You can check this on the client. But if we have to connect to the database for that client and verify their phone number, then we need a Java server page or active server page or CGI or something that runs on the server and connects to the database to verify that stuff. And that cannot be done in JavaScript. Or it's usually not done in JavaScript. This is another short table of the server codes. So we have 100 is information, 200 is success, 300 is redirection, 400 client errors, and 500 server errors.